Hey folks, how you doing? Going straight into the talky parts of this video. I have a Fender Stratocaster here, and I've been seeing a lot of people talking about some recent legal issues with Fender sending cease and desist letters and demanding like $250,000 and destruction of all product for people making Stratocaster style guitars. Now, it's an interesting case for a couple of technical reasons, but the big point I want to make here is that the YouTube sphere has more or less all come to the same conclusion, which is that Fender as a brand, as a company, is somehow shooting themselves in the foot by engaging in this lawfare. And to be contrarian, but to back up my claims, I'll give you some justification for why I think this. I don't think Fender will suffer any real negative consequence for engaging in the lawfare that is getting everybody upset right now. And in fact, I think it will benefit their brand long term. I'll explain why. Before I get into that, let me just say I don't have any relationship with Fender. Fender has never sponsored a video of mine. They've never given me anything for free. I might have gotten a free cable at the NAMM show like 25 years ago. I know Daddario has given me a couple free cables, but that would be the extent of any relationship I've had with Fender. I've never been sponsored by them. This is not them putting me up to anything. This is not me shilling for Fender. I have had a number of Fender guitars over the years, and you can see me actually play this guitar and a bunch of others over on my music channel linked down below. So I am a fan of the guitars because I've played them for a long time, and I guess you should know that, but otherwise, me and Fender, there's nothing between us. So let me get to the particulars of the lawsuit, which is really that there was a default judgment for a copyright claim, not a trademark claim, for this body style. This is a Stratocaster, a Fender Stratocaster. The thing is, a whole bunch of companies make Strat style guitars that are exact matches to Fender Strats in everything, like the hardware, the arrangement, the body shape, neck shape. Often headstock is what you can't get away with because this little scrolled headstock is a trademark of Fender. But the lawsuit that they won was not a trademark. The Stratocaster, I guess back in 2009, there was some legal proceedings, and the conclusion was that the Strat style guitar, the Stratocaster style guitar, was generic at this point because Fender hadn't really defended its trademarks very vigorously in the past, and everybody was making Strat copies. Even Gibson made Strat copies. You can find Epiphone branded Stratocasters. They're out there. So given that, how did we arrive at this point where Fender is now sending cease and desist letters and demanding like $250,000 and destruction of product to people who were selling their guitars? I guess in Germany was where this default judgment was. Well, they sued a Chinese company. The Chinese company didn't show up, and so they basically got a default judgment for copyright, not trademark. And that's kind of what makes this interesting, because copyright tends to be a much more narrow defense, but it has some advantages compared to trademark. So the headstock is trademark, and trademark really has to do with it's associated with a brand to the point where you can't really like use it without confusing a consumer. That would be kind of the thought process behind most trademarks, right? Like you can't call your restaurant McDonald's because people will think it's a McDonald's. And if you use like the golden arches, people would think it was a McDonald's, and you haven't paid the franchise fee, and you're not serving McDonald's food. And it could harm McDonald's because the food could be bad. There's all kinds of things that go into trademark. So this would be trademark because it looks like, you know, it's a Fender style headstock. Gibson has successfully sued and defended their trademark of the Les Paul style body shape, the Les Paul body shape. And you'll find some of their competitors, such as Guild, they make a Les Paul guitar, and I have a Les Paul style Guild guitar as well as a real Les Paul. It's just slightly different. It's a little bit bigger. the lines are not quite there, right? It's a little bit different body style than a Gibson. And you get the same thing with like the Guild Polara is an SG, but the horns are slightly offset. So it looks something like between an SG and a Strat. It's different is the point. So Gibson's been able to successfully do that. And people really were upset about Gibson, like suing Dean and saying that they have a trademark on this Les Paul style body shape and no one else can make that Les Paul style body shape. And what was the result of that? Well, the result was no harm really to Gibson. They didn't really suffer any negative brand damage. And in fact, the value of Gibson guitars actually went up because you were reducing some of the competition. You were getting the guitars that were really similar to a Les Paul, but maybe were at a different price point or a better price point with their relative features. You're getting them off the market, maybe from Dean or some other company that's making things that are really similar. And so, yeah, it's going to make you able to better present the value of your product. Your product is more unique and therefore more valuable. And so this is what I think Fender's trying to do. I think that it's not really going to be successful because of the more narrow definition of copyright. Now, while trademark is in a lot of ways more robust, it doesn't really expire. Like a company can own a trademark forever. Copyright is pretty narrow. It's limited to whatever that one thing is. It's an artistic product. So saying the shape of the guitar is an artistic design. It's not purely to do with the brand, but it's an artistic design. And Fender, of course, being the owner of all of Leo Fender's intellectual property, would be the one that owns the copyright of that. But there's some problems with that. Like, is the color copyrighted? This one's white and red. Is that, can it be other colors? What if I make one that's a weird color that Fender hasn't used? Is that outside of copyright? It's not as defined as trademark because the shape of this headstock, the shape of a Les Paul guitar can be trademarked. And all of the other arrangements that you add onto that are superfluous. But copyright tends to get stuck not to a category of products, but to a specific creative work. So like my books are copyrighted. That means I own the copyright for them by virtue of the fact that I created them. And so specific books are copyrighted, but like you can't copyright a genre. Right? A genre can't be copyrighted. That's too broad. That's too many different things. A category, it doesn't work that way. So you can't copyright a category. You can only copyright a specific work. So what specific guitar is copyrighted? There's a lot of different arrangements of a Fender guitar. It's all kind of up in the air. Will it hold up to legal scrutiny for whoever wants to really litigate this with Fender? I bet you it won't. However, well, I think Fender actually suffer negativity from this because all the YouTubers are like, Fender's really bad Fender. Fender is like shooting themselves in the foot. I don't think so. And the reason is that, what are we all talking about? We're talking about how the Fender Stratocaster guitar is a Fender guitar. That's what we're talking about. That's what everyone on YouTube that's dealing with this issue is talking about. We're talking about how a Fender guitar is a Fender guitar. We're talking about how the Strat is indelibly linked to the Fender brand. That's what we're talking about. So it's increasing brand awareness, and more importantly, it is getting people to think about the fact that the Stratocaster is fundamentally a Fender design. So even if they can't stop other companies from making a Strat style guitar, everyone's going to know, well, a Strat is really a Fender. So they had that whole Play Authentic. They had like a Play Authentic campaign thing that went on. This is that, but just to a greater degree. That's what we're going to have. And so everybody's going to be thinking about this. And so long term, if they can reduce the number of people selling Strat copy guitars, that could be good for them because that will probably reduce their competition in the Squier market. But if everybody's like, okay, well, we'll change it a little bit. It's not that hard to make your CNC machine cut like a slightly different like body shape, or to sell some other body shape that you don't have a copyright entered from a default judgment in. All right, that can do something else there. So it could improve their prospects long term, but long term, really what we're thinking of is this shaped guitar is a Fender. And now everybody's thinking that, and everybody's talking about that. Even lay people are going to think a little bit outside the box, or not outside the box. It could be a little bit inside of what Fender wants the box of the Stratocaster to be. And so even though the lawfare, they can afford to do the lawfare, it's a bad look for PR. I think the bigger meta issue is we're making this more related to the brand, to the Fender brand, and people are going to be thinking about that long term. Now, the other problem is why are YouTubers all thinking that this is going to be this bad thing for Fender? And I think it has to do with partly the influencer bubble, but what I call the enthusiast bubble. When you're an enthusiast in an area, you tend to think differently from casual consumers. You tend to think differently about what matters and what's important and what's possible. So I've experienced this with the Star Wars fandom. I've experienced this with, music. I've experienced this with writers. The people who are enthusiasts, the people who know the most about a category or a product, they don't model their thinking the way that other consumers do. So are other consumers going to really care about Fender suing people for making Strat copies? And they probably are not even going to be aware of it, and they're not going to really care that much. Just like with Gibson. The enthusiasts really cared about Gibson suing companies like Dean over trademark disputes, but the boots on the ground didn't really care. So when you're an enthusiast and you're talking about guitar all the time, and you're a guitar YouTuber and you're thinking about guitar all the time, then the tendency is to say, oh, well, this is going to be really bad because Fender's doing something I don't like, and other people think like me. My people in my comments of my videos, they think like me. And so you start to have this model of the world where everyone really shares your interest and shares your enthusiasm for a product, and that's not reality. It's not reality for guitars. Now, it's partly reality, right? Like there's people like me who are musicians. I've been a musician for decades at this point, so I've collected a lot of guitars. There's people who collect guitars, but most people have one or two guitars if they're guitar players, and that was me for a long time. I had 2 electric guitars for years, and I only was able to get more of them kind of as I felt like I needed a different kind of guitar to do something. I would put some money together and buy that guitar. But most people have 1 or 2 guitars. They're looking to buy a new guitar. They are aware of the Fender brand. If they've heard about this controversy, then they're thinking, oh, well, the Strat is a Fender Strat. And they're probably not trying to participate in any kind of boycott or like customer revolt or anything like that. They just buy a good product, and the music store will have a good product there for them, which may be a Fender guitar. So your typical consumer is actually going to probably think that the Fender brand is better because they are going to be more aware of the Stratocaster being a Fender body style, that is the Fender body style as well as the Telecaster. So Telecaster might be next on the list. So I think it's a problem of the enthusiast bubble. It's like people thinking, oh, why do people play console games? Like PC games are the ultimate thing. And the reason people play console games is because they're not as enthusiastic about games as the PC gamer is. They don't want to spend $2,500 on a gaming rig or more now, They don't want to spend all that money on a PC. They want to buy a $500 PlayStation and just play games on their TV. And so the enthusiast doesn't model the behavior of the normal person because everyone in his sphere, he's talking to lots of people online, they all think like he does. So his model is everyone thinks the way I think. And that's really easy to get into that bubble. When you're talking about something like guitars or music, you start to think everybody thinks the way that you think, and that's just not the case. I remember this with Star Wars, as everyone thought this Star Wars movie was going to bomb, or that Star Wars movie was going to bomb, or this person was going to get fired, and none of it happened. Why? They were in that little bubble. They were in the bubble where everybody was thinking the way they were thinking, and they weren't really paying attention to the way normal people and normal consumers interacted with the Star Wars brand. Okay, so I think it'll be the same thing with, say, the Fender brand, is that I don't think long-term Fender will have a lot of stuff. And, let's say that they decide that there's been a big negative reaction, and they want to walk it back. Well, they can always just apologize and say, hey, we overstepped our bounds. We're just really enthusiastic about defending our intellectual property. We really care about people knowing that Leo Fender was the one who designed these products, and he did them as an artist. And we want you to be able to, and we want other companies to be able to know that this can't be separated from Leo Fender. And they can have a little statement that's like that, and we're not going to pursue legal action against people copying Leo Fender's work. But if you want to play an authentic one, you know that it's going to be Fender. And people will be like, okay, they dropped the bad legal stuff. I guess I won't badmouth them anymore. But in the result is, we've talked about how a Strat is a Fender. The authentic form of the Stratocaster is going to be the Fender Stratocaster and not some other brand. It's not going to be a Yamaha Stratocaster, Yamaha S style. It's a Fender. Okay. So anyway, that's my thing there. This is a great guitar, by the way. I do really like it. If you want to see me play it, it's down below on my music channel, and I'll check you all next time. Have a great day.